Thanks for your question, Roy. I'll read it out first. So Roy asks, how good does the writing have to be? A lot of advice stresses the need to put your best foot forward and ensure that the opening sentence, paragraph, scene and chapter really shine. That advice goes on to say that the rest of the manuscript should all be of that standard. Is there really no place for a more pedestrian prose that just gets the job done, describes the world, advances the plot, simply and unobtrusively telling the story? That's a great question, and I won't duck out of giving a proper answer by saying it's subjective and everyone has different approaches, because we all already know that. So my approach is that there's absolutely a place for utility writing, if you want to call it that, writing that just gets the job done, as you said. The reason I say that is because realistically, there has to be. I don't think it's really possible to make every line in your novel perfect and poetic or punchy and impactful. Sometimes certain actions and certain messages are just simple and it's impossible to make them more than they are. What it comes down to for me is clarity. I think that's one of the most important parts of a novel in general. The plot should be clear, characters should be clear, the line by line writing I think should be clear. That's not to say it has to be simple or stripped back, but it needs to land with the reader ahead of anything else, I think. For example, I don't think that he clasped what had once been a pine tree across the other side of the world and pulled the shaped wood into its enclosure gracefully is very clear when we could say he gently closed the door. The opening, I agree there. Show your chops, set the reader's expectations for what you can do by all means. The start of a chapter and the end of a chapter to some extent I think can also be a bit more intentional in wording, but that feels natural, I think. We feel that when we're writing anyway. Stories aren't just beautiful writing, in my opinion. They're what happens as well. They're what's going on. And we can write that beautifully for some things, grief, loss, rebellion, but simple things I think should stay simple. Readers, I think, are generally more interested in what actually happens in a story than how exactly it's written. Writers, for obvious reasons, I think, worry about quality of writing more than readers do. I'm generalising there. Obviously, there's a lot of crossover and difference of opinion, but I think your average reader is interested in the story, not just the writing. Writers like Stephen King and Harlan Coben and that kind of thing are very simply written and people love them, but it's because of the story. They might not pick out, a couple of lines that really stand out from that work as being beautifully written, but it doesn't do anything for how much they enjoy the story. It doesn't take away anything from their experience of reading the book. My approach is definitely to focus on the start and the end of the book and to put my best writing there on the first and the last page and to make those as polished as possible. And then I give a bit of that energy to the openings and closings of chapters as well. Beyond that, be perfect where the story calls for it and be simple where the story calls for that is what I would suggest. Also, personally, I could not sustain that kind of quality all the way through an entire novel, not if I wanted to finish it in under a decade anyway, but that's just me. Other writers may vary, of course. Anyway, hope that answers your question. Thanks for your support.